Hey up everyone, how's it going? And in today's video I'm going to gloss over hard drives versus SSDs. Both of these storage technologies are pretty common in pretty much everyday technology. Desktop PCs will either have a hard drive or an SSD. Same with laptops as well. Most mobile devices like phones will have flash storage. I've never seen a phone with a hard drive in it actually, but correct me if I'm wrong. For example, my personal PC behind me has both SSD storage and hard drive storage, so you can have both as well. So essentially this video isn't designed for the person that knows a lot about tech. It's designed for the person that may not know the differences between an SSD or a hard drive, or may be unfamiliar with what to choose for their system and how to sort of organise it out. Starting off with a good old trusty mechanical hard drive. Hard drives utilise multiple spinning discs, which are otherwise known as platters, with a recording head. This recording head will read and write data to each one of the discs. And this is why hard drives are much slower by nature, because the disc has to physically spin around, and in an SSD this just does not need to happen. So the benefits of having a hard drive in your system is they are much cheaper than SSDs per gigabyte. A 1 terabyte hard drive in the UK will usually cost you about 35 quid, which is pretty cheap for a terabyte of storage. They also give audible warnings before them about to die. Sometimes, this may not always be the case, do not rely off this, but they will start making loud clicking noises and they'll just sound genuinely weird before they die out, so you get some audible factors as well before they die. Speaking about hard drives dying, if they're staying stationary a lot of the time, so they're not moving around in a laptop or whatever like that, they are pretty reliable if they're not in a mobile environment. So if they're just in your desktop, staying still, there's no like bangs or rattles, anything like that often, that can last pretty long. Getting into the downsides of hard drives, the main problem with them is the slow data transfer rate. They will only transfer about 100 megabytes per second, which used to be pretty good, now is not too great, considering that most SATA SSDs are capable of 500 megabytes a second. So yeah, they are looking pretty old at this point. But this isn't so much of a problem if the hard drive's not actually running the operating system and you're just loading up media files. That's really not an issue half the time. Shaking a hard drive around is probably a good way to kill it. This is because they are really susceptible to shock damage. So if you drop them, if they're in a vibration where they're moving all the time, it is not the best for them because it just kills them. It just kills them. Another main problem with hard drives is their operating system performance. If you have your operating system on a hard drive, chances are that operating system is very sluggish and not responsive at all. This is where an SSD will just completely change it, night and day difference. Now moving on to SSDs. SSDs use NAND flash to store their data. So in SSDs there's no moving parts, unlike a hard drive, which makes them much quicker. SSDs come in a variety of form factors. So this is a 2.5 inch SATA SSD. There are also M.2 SATA SSDs, there are also M.2 NVMe SSDs, and there are also PCIe SSDs which slot into the PCIe slots. There are many positives for having an SSD in your system, the main being the read and write performance. A basic SATA SSD like this is a really low end model, can do about 500 megabytes per second. Compare that to about 100 megabytes a second from a typical hard drive. Gen 3 NVMe SSDs can go up to a theoretical limit of 4,000 megabytes per second. That's read and write, so they are quite fast, but not as fast as Gen 4 SSDs, which can go to 8,000 megabytes per second read and write. So that is an insane level of bandwidth, which is way faster than a typical hard drive, about 80 times faster. Another really good positive for SSDs is they're not really prone to shock damage. As long as you don't physically smash the SSD, so I mean by full on volleying it at a wall, you're fine. They've got no moving parts, they're not as delicate as hard drives. and then pretty good to have in a mobile environment. So like a laptop, you can move the laptop around, everything like that, and it'll still be perfectly fine. That won't break an SSD at all. An SSD's performance as an OS disk is miles better than a hard drive. Even a basic SATA SSD will have a night and day difference against a typical hard drive. This is why I recommend, if you're still using a PC or a laptop with a hard drive as an OS disk, get that upgraded to an SSD. Another big performance bonus for an SSD is they will load games much faster. So say if you've got a big open world game, let's say Assassin's Creed for example, you want to fast travel from one place to another, just pretty much loads almost instantly. So yeah, you don't get that on a hard drive. However, an SSD isn't a completely flawless device. There are some issues. The main problem being their cost per gigabyte. As I said, a 1TB hard drive costs around 35 quid in the UK. A 1TB basic SATA SSD will cost you just under £100. So yes, the storage is faster and you get all them benefits, but it is quite a bit more pricey. Also, SSDs have an inherent problem where if they're written to a lot, it does wear out the drive pretty quickly. A good way to kill an SSD is just to keep writing to it. Reading from the drive isn't too bad, but writing to it definitely does hammer it quite a bit. And another downside, which may not be a downside, is that NVMe SSDs specifically can get quite hot when they're reading or writing a lot, but that's not really a problem as most motherboards nowadays come with M.2 heatsinks, so that problem isn't really a problem. I just thought I'd mention it. So each different drive technology has its ups and downs, but with SSDs becoming increasingly more affordable, which is actually one of the only computer components that is, I can't recommend having a desktop PC or a laptop PC without at least an SSD as a boot drive. As I've said about 500 million times in this video, having an OS disk which is an SSD is pretty much a requirement in 2021. And if you don't have the budget, get the SSD first, like a 250 gig SSD, and then save for however long it needs to take you to get a 1TB hard drive as well. Also, as SSDs are becoming increasingly more common, it doesn't mean that the hard drive is going to go away anytime soon. Especially in the enterprise space, hard drives are used more abundantly than SSDs, and mainly because they store a large amount of data relatively reliably for a pretty low cost compared to flash storage, and if you write to them loads, it doesn't harm them as much as it would harm an SSD. Okay, so to conclude, the TLDR of this video is SSDs, they're fast, they're a bit more expensive, they take shocks pretty well, just don't write to them a lot. Hard drives, they're pretty big in storage, they're pretty slow, but they're cheap, and don't shake them around. So that's the easy TLDR of this video. So if you like this video, like it. If you dislike this video, dislike it, and stay subscribed for future content, and I'll catch you in the next one.